Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the show, Metro Detroit is in motion. In Southwest, heavy trucks are finally being steered off neighborhood streets. In Northville, a car-free downtown that once drew crowds now finds itself at a crossroads. And new data shows more Detroiters slipping into poverty, and even as parts of the city shine with growth.
Later, we'll turn to stories of identity and heritage. We'll talk about how colorism shapes daily life in Latino communities. And we'll revisit the history of Latino workers in Detroit's auto plants. Their labor helped shape the city's economy and neighborhoods.
These stories, along with debates over trucks, cars, and poverty, all raise the same question. Who gets a share of Detroit's future? And who gets left behind? That's all today on the Metro.
And we start this morning in Southwest Detroit, where 18-wheeled vehicles rumble through streets that aren't made for them. Heavy truck traffic has been more than just an inconvenience here. For years, it's meant noise, pollution, and danger for neighbors. And the problem is significant. Detroit is one of the country's busiest freight hubs. Per reporting from Outlier Media, about 128,000 loaded containers entered the city in July alone. To improve the situation, the city of Detroit is creating new truck restrictions on certain streets, which, according to one city official, is the biggest series of truck route restrictions happening here in some time. To discuss the issue and the solution to it, we have Samuel Krassenstein here with us. He's the Chief of Infrastructure and also Deputy Director for Public Works for the City of Detroit. Sam, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So before getting into what the city is doing to curb truck traffic, you're the Chief of Infrastructure for Detroit. Infrastructure can feel gray and boring to a lot of people, but it's actually really cool. Why do you like it? What do you find inspiring about it?
Well, number one, it's super interesting for me. You look at just driving down the street, and as a Detroit resident myself, I see all the things that infrastructure touches. So, street designs, the water mains, the overhead power, the telecoms, it's all just really interesting to me to see how the pieces fit together. And a big part of that is the traffic on the streets.
Yeah. So in other words, when infrastructure is done well, that is something that we're not necessarily noticing. Is that right? I mean, what's a project of creating infrastructure that works for everyone?
Yeah, so when infrastructure works well, almost nobody notices it because it's working seamlessly in the background. But when it doesn't work well, everybody notices it. So you take, for example, also in Southwest Detroit, by example, the huge water main break that we had with Great Lakes Water Authority earlier this year. Obviously something that's hugely impactful and everyone notices. But if the water main doesn't break, nobody notices it and no one is talking about it.
Sure. Water mains are a good example of this. I want to talk about another example, a hurdle that Detroit is facing related to infrastructure, and that's why we have you on the show today, and that is that many trucks are traversing streets they shouldn't be, neighborhood streets. And this has to do with the Detroit Intermodal Freight Terminal in Southwest Detroit. Now, that's a transportation hub where freight containers are transferred between trains and trucks. So first, why is the problem related to this freight terminal specifically?
So the Livernois Intermodal Hub, which we affectionately call the DIFT, the Detroit Intermodal Freight Terminal.
You city folks and your acronyms. City of Detroit, you love all your acronyms. Yes, go on.
So I'm going to refer to it as the DIFT throughout this. But the big part of the DIFT is the trains bring in these containers, and the containers are holding a variety of things. So it could be auto parts for OEMs or Tier 1 suppliers. It could be agricultural products, or it could be, liquid containers. So it's a whole variety of things that are coming in and out of, not just the facility and Southwest Detroit, but around intermodal hubs around the city and around the country. So the basic premise of it is train comes in, unloads the containers, and a truck picks it up and either takes it to its end destination or takes it to a holding yard called a drayage facility. So a lot of the truck traffic we see is a result of the trucks taking the boxes off the trains and taking them to some other point around the city or around the region. And overall, it's great because trains reduce overall truck traffic. But when the hub is actually in your backyard, then you have, the containers still have to get to their end destination, and that's all the truck traffic, or at least a large part of what we have in Southwest Detroit.
So, in other words, folks then outside of Southwest Detroit are going to see less truck traffic, but this is the hub. This is the heart of it all. So folks within Southwest are seeing this step in the process as well. And the issue began, about 10 to 15 years ago?
It's been a lot longer than that. So the intermodal rail hub's been there, more than 50 years at this point. The facility's been there, if not longer. But really over the last 10, 15 years, as the, post-bankruptcy, post-depression in 2008, with the resurgence of the automotive industry, freight is coming along a big part with that. So there was an effort in the late 2000s led by Michigan DOT, MDOT, to look at the whole intermodal ecosystem in Southeast Michigan and focused the efforts around the Livernois facility and created a plan called the DIFT, which called for the consolidation of those intermodal rail yards into one, but also, more importantly, called for a lot of improvements to that yard to get trucks out of the neighborhood streets. So this is not a new problem that we have today, and this is a problem as far back as 2005. MDOT had been studying, trying to figure out a way on how to solve it. So fast forward about 10 years, we went through the bankruptcy, container volumes dropped, and then, with Detroit's resurgence post-bankruptcy, we're starting to see those volumes and truck traffic pick back up.
And what is that like then for residents? Let's paint a picture. People who are living or working near the freight terminal, what are they experiencing?
A lot of things right now. So number one is they're seeing a ton of truck traffic going kind of, every which way. Number two, there's a lot of fugitive dust that's generated by the site. So what we mean by fugitive dust is truck drives into the site. A lot of the site currently is not paved, and that dirt gets tracked back out into the street. And as trucks drive down the street, the dust goes into the air. So that's the general term. Fugitive dust is dust or dirt that leaves the site. So those are like two of the main things that a lot of people around the site will experience by virtue of proximity.
So quality of life is degraded, it's safe to say, because of what's happening with trucks on neighborhood streets. It also has me wondering about the way that trucks are degrading the actual streets. I mean, taxpayers end up footing the bill for road repairs and driving on some rough roads too. Is that also an issue at play here?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair statement, is that when trucks drive on streets that are not designed for the truck traffic, a lot of the Detroit streets were initially built in the early 1900s, and we've done a pretty good job maintaining them, keeping them up. But the heavier the trucks that are driving on them, the more quickly the streets are going to be degraded. Yes.
And when we think about the problem of all of this truck traffic in Southwest, a lot of folks might think, oh, well, this is because we share a border with Canada. A ton of trade happens between our countries, and a lot of trucks move through areas on both sides of the border. Why is the problem not more closely related to truck traffic coming to or from Windsor?
So, a lot of the truck traffic coming to and from Windsor is not going to the intermodal. There's certainly rail lines between the U.S. and Canada that they can go between the sites. It's more that trucks coming in are, generally going on and off of the freeway. So currently with the Ambassador Bridge and with the Blue Water Bridge much further north, and then the soon-to-open Gordie Howe Bridge, most of that truck traffic we expect is going to be, freeway to freeway. That's not truck traffic that's generally going into the neighborhoods, trying to go to a business or go to a large freight yard. Most of that's just going to the freeway.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Samuel Krassenstein. He's the Chief of Infrastructure and also Deputy Director for Public Works for the City of Detroit. We're discussing the City of Detroit changing which roads trucks are allowed to navigate around Southwest Detroit. And this is to prevent big 18-wheelers from going down neighborhood streets. Now, Sam, you've been working on this issue for a long time, and the city is now about to announce a new series of truck restrictions that are going to ensure these vehicles can't travel down certain streets. What are those streets?
So overall, provide a little bit of context here. So the city of Detroit has been studying the overall trucking problem in Southwest Detroit for a few years. So starting under former Councilmember Castellina Lopez, who commissioned our department to do an initial truck study, and then we did a follow-up study a couple years ago to really look at all of the routes in Southwest Detroit to hear, well, what are the issue routes overall? Because what we didn't want to do was to just respond to a couple community complaints, put up a no truck sign, and have the trucks just go to the next street and just basically have a game of whack-a-mole.
Right.
So what we tried to do is really take a holistic look at the entire network in Southwest Detroit, doing what we called an origin-destination study. So understanding where the trucks are coming from and where are they going to, and what routes they're taking today, and if we imposed restrictions, what their alternative route would be. At the end of the day, we do have to make sure we're preserving access for the businesses and for industry, including the rail hub here. And so going through this, we set out with a goal is really all the streets between Werner Highway and I-75. All of the north-south streets are, residential or commercial in nature, and none of them are really suited for heavy truck traffic. So the restrictions we're going to be implementing really focus on those north-south corridors in between Werner and I-75. So that includes, streets where we've heard a lot of complaints like Livernois and Dragoon, I would say, is probably the heart of where we have heard the most complaints. And it's also natural because that's the easiest access from that industrial area down towards I-75. So that's where we're starting with, making some of our changes. But we're also looking at other north-south streets like Clark and Scotton by Clark Park. We're looking at Lanyo and Central North over towards Romanowski and Patton Parks, and we're looking at those corridors that are really used as a cut through today. So the restrictions that we're going to be putting into effect are really focused on reducing cut through truck traffic that are currently being used as shortcuts to access the freeway.
As you're speaking, Sam, it's making me think back to what we were talking about initially about what good infrastructure looks like. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me that one element of this is also listening to residents. Can you talk about how that really plays into improving infrastructure? Because it sounds to me like you've been really focused on residents' concerns and complaints, and that has really given rise to this change.
It has, and there's definitely truth in the adage, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, in that, we're only here because of the continued advocacy from our community partners, from current council member Santiago Romero, and all of the community groups and residents that have, really made it clear that this truck traffic issue is, something that is, very serious and needs to be dealt with and looked at by the city. And part of that is not just looking at the routes, but it's going back to, some of the other quality of life issues that we mentioned earlier related to this intermodal hub. So the other things that we're looking at in addition to the truck restrictions are, engineering solutions around the hub itself. So we're in partnership with MDOT and each of the railroads that operate out of that facility, Norfolk Southern, CSX, and Conrail, to modernize that facility to deal with some of those other quality of life issues. So one of the things that we were successful doing is doing joint grant applications and partnerships with them. So we were successful in obtaining a $67 million Federal Railroad Administration grant to modernize the Norfolk Southern facility that operates at Livernois and Federal. And what that grant's going to do is, number one, it's going to pave the entire site so that we deal with the fugitive dust problem at the source. Right now, it's very after the fact in putting out street sweepers and, making sure vehicles are clean, trying to do that, leaving on and off the site. But if we deal with the fugitive dust at the source, we deal with a huge quality of life concern right off the bat. The second thing is we're adding better berm and screening at the facility so the residents that do live across the street or traverse Livernois don't have to, just be looking at all of the trucks and hearing the noise and some of those negative externalities they may be dealing with today. And the third is we'll be modernizing the Livernois Federal intersection to basically physically prevent trucks from using some of those streets that are cut through. And we'll be physically sending all the trucks that are coming in and out of that facility north up to I-94.
So all of these changes, they go back to not only the concerns of residents, but local leadership and the advocacy of local leaders. And this has me thinking about the fact that Mayor Duggan is leaving soon, which means the people who work in city government may change a lot, as well as the plans they've developed. I'm wondering, before I let you go, how might the infrastructure plans change with a new administration coming in?
Well, hopefully at the end of the day, infrastructure is still infrastructure. The problems that we have don't change, and most of the engineering stays the same. So we're hopeful that as new leadership comes in at both the local level and eventually at the state level, that the priorities and goals that we're working on today, we can continue to be working towards the solutions that we and our community partners and advocates have all been continuing to put in over the last few years.
Samuel Krassenstein is Detroit's Chief of Infrastructure and its Deputy Director for Public Works. Sam, thanks for joining me on the Metro.
Thanks again for having me.
Up on the Metro. On Wednesday, a Wayne County judge will decide on the future of street-side dining in downtown Northville. I spoke with residents who want to keep downtown Northville car-free. That's next here on the Metro. Stay with us.